Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Roger Johnson. I'm Rachel Burden.
Hi, good morning. Our headlines today: a second national lockdown in England to last for a month. It comes in response to fears that the rise in coronavirus cases could overwhelm hospitals.
I'm afraid from Thursday, the basic message is the same. Stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives.
As infections surge, the total number of positive cases in the UK has now passed 1 million.
The prevalence of this disease has been going up extremely rapidly over the last few weeks.
The furlough scheme has been extended across the UK until December to support workers who are affected by the new measures.
Bond. James Bond.
And tributes to Sir Sean Connery, the original James Bond.
Good morning. We're just getting started. England captain Owen Farrell praises his side after winning the Six Nations. It went down to the last day, but a bonus point victory against Italy gave England the title after France and Ireland failed to catch them.
Plus, it's another day of very strong winds across parts of the country. Some rain at times to go with it, but is there a glimpse of something brighter on the horizon? Join me for all the details here on Breakfast.
It is Sunday, the 1st of November. Our top story on the programme this morning: England is to face a new lockdown starting on Thursday, scheduled to last a month after Boris Johnson announced that he needs to take action to prevent the NHS being overwhelmed by cases of coronavirus.
Under the lockdown, restaurants and pubs will close, but takeaways and deliveries will be allowed.
All non-essential retail will shut. Supermarkets, though, will remain open.
Mixing with other households inside homes or in private gardens will be banned, except for childcare and other forms of support.
And unlike the first lockdown, schools, colleges and universities will stay open. Travel will be discouraged, except for work.
Clearly still many questions, but let's get some more details now from our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake.
Dreary weather and dire warnings set the scene for what in the end seemed inevitable. A national lockdown for England, the Prime Minister said, was now the only option.
We've got to be humble in the face of nature, and in this country, alas, as across much of Europe, the virus is spreading even faster than the reasonable worst case scenario, and so now is the time to take action because there is no alternative.
The last resort had become the only way forward, he argued, and in a matter of days, tough measures would be imposed, severely limiting people's lives.
We will get through this, but we must act now to contain this autumn surge. We're not going back to the full-scale lockdown of March and April, but I'm afraid from Thursday, the basic message is the same. Stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives.
The decision marks a complete change in the government's approach. Some had argued it should have come sooner, but yesterday acknowledged there were no easy options.
The idea that there is some perfect time to act is a complete misapprehension. There is basically no perfect time and there are no good solutions.
MPs will vote on the plans this week. Some Conservatives don't want another lockdown. Labour said it would support the measures, but that ministers should have acted sooner.
The Prime Minister has now been forced to act. We're pleased that he has finally acted, but I'm just so sad that we've had weeks of dither from the Prime Minister, which has meant people have lost their lives and people have become seriously ill. He should have acted sooner.
This is a move Boris Johnson didn't want to make, but the reality of rising cases forced him to act. His hope will be that in 4 weeks' time, the outlook is brighter. Jonathan Blake, BBC News.
Well, let's go to Helen Catt. She's on Downing Street, standing in front of that famous door that we just saw this morning. Helen, morning to you. Thanks very much for talking to us. It was a day of fast developments yesterday, but as Jonathan was saying, there is a vote now to come on the Prime Minister's plans.
Yes, MPs back from recess this week, and we heard there in Jonathan's piece that Labour plan to support this. They think that this should have happened weeks ago, really. But there are some Conservative MPs who are very unhappy at a second lockdown. They think it's just going to be too destructive for the economy, and they want to know what the sort of end game is. How do we get out of this? And it's also worth remembering that while we've got used to the government putting more restrictions on our everyday lives, it is a huge thing for a government to be saying when you can and can't leave your own home. And some MPs will say, well, you need to make a really compelling case to bring in restrictions like that. And we know from the press conference yesterday that Boris Johnson, however reluctantly, thinks that case has now been made through those figures, through those projected number of deaths, through the possibility of overwhelming the NHS. In terms of bringing the MPs on side with that, I mean, one Conservative MP yesterday said that they'd found the case so far underwhelming. In terms of bringing them on board, they had Downing Street invited one of the leading lockdown sceptic voices, if you like, one of those MPs into Downing Street yesterday with his own scientist to look at the data. In a message sent to Tory MPs last night, Boris Johnson promised that they too would be able to see all of the data, have access to all of the briefings from scientists that they need. But it's not just about lockdown and the principle of lockdown that's causing concern on the Conservative backbenches at the moment. There is considerable anger about how Downing Street is handling this. So I think it's all going to lead to quite a spiky few days for Boris Johnson.
Helen, thank you.
So look, let's take a look at why the government's chosen to act now. Here are the latest figures, and they show there were just under 22,000 new coronavirus infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, taking the total number of UK cases to more than 1 million.
Now, the average number of new cases reported per day in the last week is just over 22,500, and sadly 326 deaths were reported yesterday, and that's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test.
And it means on average in the past week 259 deaths were announced every day. That takes the total number of deaths across the UK to more than 46,500.
So let's have a quick reminder of the restrictions which are in place around the country. Obviously, England going into this new lockdown on Thursday. Wales around halfway through a 17-day lockdown with people only allowed to leave their homes for limited reasons. It's currently set to finish next Monday.
And then in Scotland, a new 5-level system of restrictions for tackling the virus will come into force tomorrow. And First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has urged against non-essential travel to England.
And then in Northern Ireland, the First Minister Arlene Foster has said that the current tighter restrictions there will end as planned on the 13th of November. That's a week on Friday. Pubs and restaurants there are closed. Schools have been shut for 2 weeks, but they'll reopen on Monday.
Well, the government's furlough scheme, which was going to end yesterday, is now being extended for that month. It covers 80% of the salaries of employees who are unable to work.
Our business correspondent Katie Austin has got this report on what it means for businesses and for the self-employed.
This was the Zimbri restaurant in Bournemouth in August, busy with Eat Out to Help Out diners. From Thursday, it will, alongside all other pubs and restaurants in England, have to close for a month and once again put staff on furlough.
A lot of businesses only just came out of this last lockdown. A lot of businesses won't come out of the second lockdown. Furlough will help employees. It will not save businesses. Then will need to be more grants, VAT, rates.
The furlough scheme had already cost £40 billion. It's difficult to tell just yet what the cost of this extra month will be, but again it's likely to run into the billions. For businesses in England which are legally forced to close, there will be grants worth up to £3,000. Mortgage holidays for homeowners are also being extended. There hasn't been additional support announced for the self-employed above 2 further winter grants from today that were previously announced. But Helena, who started her ice cream business in Cardiff in August last year, says she's among those who haven't been entitled to any financial help so far and still won't be.
All of my scheduled work was cancelled and I've lost an entire peak season because ice cream is very much a seasonal business. So it's been an incredibly worrying time for me. And of course, I don't know if or when I'll be allowed to return to work properly again.
A more severe lockdown, something like we saw back in the first part of this year, will mean that millions of self-employed people cannot work at all. They are not going to be able to survive on the 40% figure that's being offered at the moment. And we would urge the government to look at that very closely.
A Treasury spokesperson said the amount of profits covered by the self-employed grant had been increased from 20% to 40%, and that, unlike the furlough scheme, it provided 3 months of support. Katie Austin, BBC News.
Well, most of Portugal will go into another lockdown from Wednesday after a surge in coronavirus cases. People in more than 2/3 of the country, including Lisbon and Porto, will be required to stay at home unless they're going to work, school or running essential errands. The measures will be reviewed in 2 weeks.
At least 2 people have been stabbed to death and 5 more wounded in the Canadian city of Quebec. Police told people to remain indoors after the attack near Parliament Hill in the historic Old Quebec neighbourhood on Saturday night. A man in his 20s was arrested.
Rescue workers in Turkey have been working through the night to pull survivors from the rubble of buildings which collapsed during Friday's earthquake. At least 37 people have been killed, most of them in the Turkish port city of Izmir. But the quake also struck the Greek island of Samos, where 2 children died. More than 800 people have been injured.
Big week in the United States, of course, the US presidential election on course for a record turnout. More than 90 million Americans have voted early, and that's actually 2/3 of the total number of people who voted back in 2016.
So we've got 2 days of campaigning left. Mr. Biden was joined by his former boss, Barack Obama, for a rally in the crucial swing state of Michigan. Our North America correspondent Peter Bowes reports.
A star-powered rally for Joe Biden in America's industrial heartland, Detroit, also home to Motown. Stevie Wonder performed at the drive-in event, while Barack Obama launched another scathing attack on Donald Trump's record.
I understand this is a president who wants full credit for the economy he inherited and gets zero blame for the pandemic he ignored, but the job doesn't work that way. Tweeting at the TV doesn't fix things. Making stuff up doesn't make people's lives better. You've got to have a plan.
Mr. Obama said his former deputy would take the job seriously. Joe Biden criticised President Trump over the amount he paid in taxes during his first year in office.
$750? My Lord. And remember when he was asked about why I only paid that much, it's because I'm smart. He knew how to game the system. Well, guess what, Mr. President? I'm coming for you.
President Trump has been campaigning in Pennsylvania, where he held 4 events in one day. He won here in 2016, but Joe Biden is ahead in the polls.
Hello, Pennsylvania. Let's go, Pennsylvania. We've got to do the same thing we did 4 years ago, and I have a feeling, look at this, I have a feeling we're going to do it.
Mr. Trump told the crowd he would eradicate the coronavirus and get Americans back to work.
We want normal. We want normal. We want normal. Let's go back. Go back 7 months. Hello, how are you doing?
But with record numbers of new coronavirus cases in the US over the past week, there's no sign of this country getting back to normal anytime soon. Peter Bowes, BBC News, Los Angeles.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.